Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mugs and Hugs with Heidi Marlinghouse, and I'm Jennifer Osger. And today we have Jerry Carbo. We have known each other for a couple of years now, I believe,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the best way to just kick this off is to ask our little introduction question. So if people were to look you up on the internet, what would they find and what are you known for?
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, some of the basics they'd find I'm a professor at Shippensburg University, and I am in a business school. I teach about labor relations and business and society. But they'd also see I'm the president of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition. And I think they would see that I'm an employee rights advocate. Published a couple of books, and those deal with workplace bullying as well as social sustainability. And yeah, those are really the two big pieces or two big parts of my career. And it's really about ending workplace bullying and creating a system that we all can thrive under, workers across the board and educators and society as a whole.
Thank you. And since you mentioned the books, what are the titles so people might find them?
Yeah, so the first one is Social Sustainability for Business, and it's sort of a boring title, and but I think the book is more interesting. But it is a bit of a textbook type of book, and we do use it for students. The other one is Understanding, Defining, and Eliminating Workplace Bullying, Assuring Dignity in the Workplace, and that's really what the goal of the book is, as well as the goal of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition to assure that dignity. And that book I think is the more interesting of the two, a little bit biased probably, but because it shares a lot of stories and there's a lot of things about what people have gone through. And I hope that it also allows current targets to sort of make connections that can help them to endure their experiences. So yeah, I hope that people find some help in that book.
Thank you very much. So, what we do is we say fast five, but it's never fast because the conversations just get so deep. And, originally we thought, oh, could we do the fast five and have like a little 15 to 20-minute discussion, kind of like a TED talk, facilitated conversation. But sometimes they, just spill in longer. And we hope that adds value to people who are watching. The first question that we have is kind of a great segue from what you were talking about is, what are you most passionate about right now and why? And keeping in mind that, we're doing this to help support people who have aspirations primarily within education. Um,
Yeah.
but still just your energies. We want to know what you're most passionate about and why, if you
Yeah,
could get into that.
cool. Yeah. I think starting from sort of the what I would call the crisis picture right now, I'm working backwards or maybe expanding out helps explain it. But right now, I mean, I think the thing that's probably on almost everybody's mind is COVID. It's a thing that we find ourselves talking about all the time. It's the thing that's impacting our lives the greatest measure or in the greatest way, even, really everybody's lives, even if they don't really think about it and how it's impacting them. So right now, my passion is focusing on that area, and I'll talk about that in relation to my sort of broader passion. But my broader passion is really always about workplace justice and always about justice in general. And so that goes for workers across the board. But one of the things you may not see yet, and I hope that this will develop when back to that first question of when you see me on the internet, when you look me up, is that a lot of my work now is in the K-12 area. And there are a number of reasons for that. I think that one, it's such a critical area, right? Again, this is something that impacts all of us in all of our areas of our lives, even if we don't think about it, right? The doctor that you visited last week, or uh, um, the product that you bought last week, the person who created that product or that doctor, they were all impacted by K-12. So it's such a critical area, and it's overlooked, I think, in a lot of our work on the workplace. So my focus has increasingly become K-12 over the past 3 to 4 years. And COVID brings that even more into focus, because we have this situation where we all know that, or maybe we don't all know, but something I've learned over those 4 years is that, teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And we talk about it a lot in general management, but I don't know that we talk about it as much in that school setting. And right now, those teachers' working conditions can be pretty bad, and it's a tough situation. I understand that for all, but teachers are the ones who are thrown into the classrooms, and oftentimes thrown into classrooms where safety measures aren't available. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm an attorney in West Virginia, but in Pennsylvania, just one of the things people don't realize is OSHA doesn't apply in our schools. So teachers don't have workplace safety measures that are guaranteed to their schools, and that's common in a lot of states, and only if states have chosen to adopt OSHA standards will they apply in their school districts. So what we see is, for a lot of teachers, the conditions are unsafe, and the conditions are stressful. And even those teachers who feel safe right now are dealing with so much stress, sometimes because of hybrid teaching, sometimes because of concern for their students, and even those who've gone virtual. Sometimes it's learning these new learning modules. Sometimes it's you know trying to figure out how to create that personal contact that they've had in the past with students in a much different environment. So my passion right now is really working to try to help teachers to take steps to make their working conditions the best that they can, and really to figure out ways that they can become empowered to do that.
Well, when you said, I it really like popped in my brain. I was not aware. Maybe this was mentioned before when we've had discussions in our group, but sometimes you need to hear things a couple of times until it sinks
Yeah.
in. In Pennsylvania, OSHA is not a mandated thing.
Yeah, for school districts. So the way OSHA works is it only applies to um, private sector workplaces. And then states have an option to either not opt in at all, to develop a state plan, or to develop a state plan that's really just says we're going to follow OSHA. Pennsylvania has adopted some state plans for public workers, but education's been left out completely. So their K-12 plan doesn't apply, or they don't have a safety plan that applies for teachers in K-12. So, the traditions of OSHA are about things that may not apply to teachers to a large extent, but over the past 20 years, it's really shifted. And so it's become a big problem where we see workers are protected from things like cumulative trauma disorders or repetitive stress issues, or the general duty clause might apply to psychological harm. K-12 is completely left out in PA. And again, it's not outside of the norm to see that.
Wow. So go ahead, Heidi. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't ready for it, but Jerry, when you were talking about your passion there, I got really emotional, like just tons of emotions just flooded up, and I got all teary-eyed. And yeah, because being a teacher myself, I felt like I wasn't treated well in some of the schools that I was at. And there was one school in particular that was not part of a main district, so there was no union. The principal was also the superintendent, was also HR.
Wow.
There was no workaround. The board just did whatever the principal said. And I was bullied.
Yeah.
My job was threatened for 2 years. And I was threatened only because I was associated with somebody that this person didn't like. And so like I remember when I first realized what was happening, I had a hard time just walking on campus. And I could feel the cortisol running through my body all day long. And I remember, because I put 150% into my classroom, I remember the guilt that I felt because I wasn't the best teacher I could be for those kids.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that to parents. I said to them, I could have done a better job, and I'm so sorry I didn't. And they were like, you were amazing. What are you talking about? And I was like, I know I could have done better. they're like, you're so hard on yourself. But it still hits me that I did not give I gave everything I had to give at the moment because of the conditions, but to know that I could do more if I had better conditions. And that's what I'm about, is creating that climate and that culture in a school so that the students thrive. And
Yeah.
it just irritated me so badly that this one person didn't like somebody else. And so they had this personal agenda, and it affected 800 kids
Yeah.
every year. It just,
Yeah.
that is disgusting to me. And it still really bothers me, you know. And I had taken this up to the state level. I had gone to the county office of ed, and nobody had anything for me. They said, if this was an issue with a student being bullied, no problem.
Yep.
But you as a teacher can't do anything. Go back to your board. And the board wouldn't do anything. I even went to the police, because the police came and did a talk with us around bullying. So I called that person and said, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about, you know, the workplace situation? If we have a principal who's bullying a superintendent who's bullying, what do we do? And she's like, we can't do anything unless she's doing it to a student. And I was really close to going to the local news, because I had a friend who was a journalist at the local news, and he said, this is absolutely newsworthy. And then I decided not to, because I knew a lot of the parents and the staff would have been really upset had I created such a stir that maybe pushed this person out, and then they had nobody, you know. And the whole reason I even went to that school was because the superintendent that was there prior was amazing and so forward thinking, but they were only there for 3 months of my term, and then it just went downhill. So anyway, listening to you and why you're passionate about what you're passionate is the same reason as why I'm passionate about it.
Great.
And it really like viscerally hit me. It was like, whoa, wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, completely understandable. And it is so much, your experience is so much into line with what targets experience with workplace bullying all the time, in so many ways. The reasons can be anything. The reasons can be so ridiculous and petty and small. And what we see is employers will allow it to occur, and then you have a bully who's willing to engage in it. Your reaction is also so typical, especially, and it's very typical because, one, we know that in the caring professions, people tend to be bullied more often, and they endure it more, because you endure it because you want to stay for your students as a teacher. You endure it because you want to stay for your patients as a nurse. You endure it because you want to stay for your clients as a social worker. And so bullying becomes more common and longer term. And then, the first reactions tend to be a loss of esteem, a belief that you're not doing what you should. Blame oftentimes comes into play. And, the unfortunate reality is, one of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition's books that we published as a coalition is about success stories. The reality is, even with success stories, there are always lingering effects. It's a lifetime experience once it occurs to you, and it doesn't leave. It never completely leaves. And we have to do more to make success stories better, because nobody should have to endure that for. We know it's going to happen. We can't eliminate all of it, but nobody should have to endure that for 3 months, 6 months, a year. Somebody should be there for people to go to correct those issues. And the reality is, everybody's harmed by it. Families are harmed by it. Organizations are harmed by it. Students, clients, employees are harmed by it. Communities are harmed by it. Targets leave. They sell their houses. They, move on. They become depressed. All kinds of negative outcomes. So, and it's always great to talk to survivors of it. So I'm so happy to be talking to you today.
Well, I am a survivor of that, but Jerry, all of those things did happen to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was broken by the time I left there, and I was gonna just start my own consulting thing and change that. Like some of it, the positive around that for me is that it gave me a lot of energy to really drive this shift in culture and climate forward, right? So I stepped out and I'm just gonna, I can't do it from inside anymore. I have to be on the outside coming in. However, I did, because I was also living in a very high income place, right? I was living in the Silicon Valley where it costs a fortune just to survive. And here I am, a teacher who doesn't make much money. I was also a fitness instructor. I had 5 jobs at
Wow.
that time. And I noticed in my fitness classes, like, you know, we actually would record like, you know, your energy levels on the, when I did indoor cycling, and I
Hmm.
could not get my levels high. And I
Yeah.
always used to. And I'm like, why is that? It's because I was depressed.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't feel depressed here, I was, and everything was heavy in my body and I just couldn't move forward very quickly. And so when I left there, I was ready to go off and be a consultant, and I ended up in another school instead. And it was less than ideal conditions. The people of the school meant well. There was no bullying going on. They were amazingly heartful people, but the structure of the school felt like a prison because it
Wow.
was so structured.
Yeah.
And again, that didn't help me bring to my students what I felt they needed to have that agency and
Yeah.
to have self-confidence. And so I was depressed already and I just couldn't do it. And my doctor said, Heidi, you're not going to make it the whole year. She's like, you're so low. And so she had me take a chart, and my anxiety and my depression was off the charts, she said.
Yeah.
So she literally like prescribed that I leave my job.
Yeah. And I've actually had that from several targets I've interviewed. It was their doctor who stepped in. And I have to say, um, as an attorney, and working in this area, oftentimes would get clients in who would have a bullying situation that's not harassment. It's not an unlawful form of harassment because it's not based upon race, color, national origin, gender, religion. But even those who come in with that type of claim, one of the 2 pieces of advice I try to give them right up front is one, the unfortunate reality is even with a strong claim, the most likely outcome is that you lose your job. Okay. Rather than getting any type of financial reward or any apology, or your job continues well for you. The second thing that I always try to tell them is you also have to be aware of when do you have to leave, because their jobs can be replaced even if it seems impossible right now, right? But you can't be replaced. And so you've got to identify that. And oftentimes it's a third party that identifies that for targets, and especially in these caring professions, again, because of the dedication that you have to those you're caring for. And that's why I just think, so much of this should be a no-brainer, right? Because if we would just let those people who have that compassion and care run the show, and make their own decisions, everyone would be better off. And so hopefully at some point we'll be able to get to that. I hope so.
Yeah, well, I moved out of California and now I'm in Oregon because I couldn't afford to live in California without that job. And I was barely making it then. But now I can afford to live, and my children have a mom again. My husband has a wife again. I'm, living in nature. I'm much happier, and I'm an education consultant doing some wonderful things with Jen here. And, we just finished a conference that was all about kids first, and the validation I got out of that, just hearing so many, 130 speakers that have the same ideals and values that I have in education. It was like, I was never off, although I
Yeah.
believed I was, because that one person, even though I knew it up here, it still
Yeah.
got in there. I'm
Yeah.
only human.
What in hearing both of you, cross validating each other, I was just having a conversation, and she's going to be doing mugs and hugs in a week, I think, next week, Heidi. And she said her mantra, because she's in the classroom and she also has aspirations to be a leader out of the classroom. And she said to me, because she's been hybrid for a couple of weeks, or maybe even since the beginning of the year, I'm not sure. And she said, my advice to you is to just tell yourself and to tell everyone, we're all doing the best we can under these conditions. And my vision is that educational leaders in the building and in the district remind us all about that, and that it's okay. And for that grace to not be perfect, you know, and, you know, our vision, Heidi and I are both very passionate, and I know you are too, Jerry, that, you know, teachers are amazing. Students are eager to learn. And how might
Yeah.
we create the best container in the classroom, out of the classroom, within the district, within the community, so that we're all supporting each other. We're all
Yeah.
feeling that we are able to thrive and flourish. And a lot of it is the leadership. And what does that look like? So I think that from my personal perspective, that is what is really energizing me. We're interested to know all of this work. When did that journey begin for you?
Yeah, it's sort of, I thought about, I think about that quite a bit. So, you know, I think it started way back when I was, I'd have to say even a teenager. My father worked in industry all of his career, and didn't bring a lot of it home with him. But as I got a little bit older, I was able to do some interning type of things in his business and see him operate. And even though he was on the management side, and I sort of had this picture of management and workers, and in his one facility it was unionized, the one that uh, remember going into his workplace, the amount of respect that he had for both, the union leadership and the workers. And, the first day I went with him, he was out walking around the plant floor and, explaining, thanking the people there rather than vice versa, and really being sort of a servant leader, and then explaining to me, those are the people who really, should get the credit. They're the ones who deserve it. They're the ones doing the real work, right? And what he's doing isn't the real work, sort of say, like he's there to serve them. um uh so I started off with it then, and then I think it's just experiences from then. I had some incredible professors in law school, Professor Decker and Feldman, who both have unfortunately passed away since then. But then in the ILR school at Cornell, Professor Lieberwitz and Compa and Gross, who focused on workers' rights and human rights, but then also seeing things. I was an accountant during the savings and loan scandal, and I saw what the big six accounting firms did to even their professional workers. And in order for the partners not to lose too much money in the scandal, they laid off massive numbers of accountants and auditors and tax professionals, and pocketed the rest of the money for themselves. When I was in law school, Baker and McKenzie, one of the biggest law firms in the country at the time, and I still think they are probably a huge law firm. I haven't followed them as much, but they were sued for like this terrible rampant sexual harassment, right? And for a law student, it was sort of like, wait a second, this should be a bastion of upholding the law, and here they are with these just ridiculous violations of what they're doing. And so, it started to, I think, make me really question that relationship even further between employer and employee. And, in my career in the past 20 years has also been in the servicing profession as a faculty member. So I experience the same type of things every day. And that's what's sort of led me to the journey to K-12 and seeing those. And now I actually have a daughter and son-in-law who are K-12 teachers. And so now I get to experience it through them as well in a really direct way. And I see, the things that they go through that I know could be so much better. And I know they, could do things so much better if those conditions were so much better.
Absolutely. I was reflecting back when you were talking about, that certain servant leadership. I love it when an organization has that, right? It just has such a different feel to it. Everybody feels like they're thriving, and production is so much better.
Yeah.
Whether it be a school, then student production is better, or if it be a manufacturing company, then the product is so much better. And that school where I was, had that unfortunate experience, the original superintendent was very much a servant leader. And I had met him when I first became a teacher back in 1999. He was in the school district that I had originally been in. And I went and toured his school as I was trying to figure out, where I wanted to work and how I wanted to work. And I was amazed that he went into every classroom every day.
Yeah.
He made his rounds. And when he walked in the first room, I remember there was a kid, it was probably a third or fourth grade. And this kid goes, "Hey, Dale," like called
Wow.
the principal by first name. And I was just blown away, right? Never seen anything like that. And then I was expecting the principal to go, "Shh," because the teacher, it was in the middle of a whole class lesson. And he didn't. He was like, "Hey, what's up, Billy? How you doing?" And I was like, "What?" And they had a conversation that lasted about 2 minutes or so. And then this principal just walked out very casually, like, "All right, let's go on to the next one." And I thought, wow, that was such a relaxed atmosphere. And those children felt so comfortable. And even though that kid was in a conversation with the principal for a minute and a half or whatever it ended up being, he didn't skip a beat. He felt
Yeah.
seen. He felt like he belonged. He enjoyed his school. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can make all the difference in the world, and it makes his job easier too, right? I mean, when you do that, and it's just, and that's the frustrating part of what I do, I think, is because it can be better for all, right? And sometimes it does take changing a little bit of our dependent variables, is what I always tell my business students, right? We get so focused on these narrow dependent variables of shareholder wealth and profit, but when we tweak those, and it doesn't mean we have to abandon those, but it means we have to look at other ones, right? And dependent variables of thriving, of people doing well, of even yourself doing well, right? As a manager. And you do so much better as a manager, even when your organization has an environment of that type of leadership. Right.
Yeah.
It's much easier for those managers than the other side of being the autocratic, the antagonistic, uh, uh, reward and punishment type of leader. And I guess it's just going to take people across the board realizing that again, and in a way, again, realizing that, because especially in K-12, I mean, one of the things I didn't mention today, but I've mentioned a lot in the past few weeks is 20 years ago, before I entered into academia, when I was more looking at industry, K-12 and higher ed were sort of known as the employers of choice. So when we looked for positive employee relations initiatives, we would expect to see those in K-12 and higher ed more than in industry. And so oftentimes those practices in schools would be adopted that direction. And I think we need to get back to that, to where we look for these positive actions that everybody can benchmark and adopt in their organizations.
Absolutely. Jen, I see we got you going on that one.
Did you see? I was trying to stay professional and take deep breaths, but I just, when I heard you say that, where the kids would see the adult and be so enthusiastic and they'd have conversations, and I'm thinking, I'm going back to school next week and it's going to be stressful. And it's one thing to validate that some people are having anxiety, but also I want to be that, "Hey, Jen," for my students, that they come into my classroom and they know that they're going to be happy in my environment. And you've just inspired me to like make that commitment, that that happy space there, because if I see all the things I'm grateful for, and to really have that type of lens, it's going to serve us all better. I just did a student reflection at the end of the marking period because grades are coming up. Perfect time to go back, right when grades are due, right? But I said I want you to reflect and be in control of your grade, because I don't know that, yes, you got your assignments in late, but you're also working 20 hours to help pay your family bills, and you're helping to raise your siblings or cousins, and that should be reflected in your grade. And then I also asked them very strength-based, open-ended questions. And I constantly am saying to them, I need you to help me to be the best teacher I can be. I'm designing these things in a bubble. My intention is this when I'm doing this at home, but the impact may be different, and let me know. And the first 10 minutes of class, we just do games, social emotional learning, and playing music. And like, I don't know if they think I'm a wackadoodle or what the heck. And knowing that you can't please everyone all the time, and there's always going to be those certain outliers. I started going through my surveys, and it was validation that I know I'm doing the right thing. I hope administration will recognize that as well. But knowing that, how can I take what I've been doing since the end of August and transition that into the hybrid model, and to, keep what's been working. So just this conversation has been very deeply meaningful to me, knowing what I'm going back to, and
Yeah.
it's Sunday, designing my lesson plans and stuff. So I needed that. So thank you.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and you have been on such a journey, and had so much effect on people. I mean, just the two of us right now, just Jen and I, talking with you, we've been extremely affected, right? And validated and inspired. So I'm wondering, what has been one of your most proudest moments doing the work that you do, and what do you contribute to that success?
Yeah. Thinking about that, I hope that the proudest moment will be down the road, right? Because the goal is to really make changes, and I would love to see, a Dignity at Work Act passed. I would love to see those things changed, so that we can eliminate this from the workplace. And I think about sort of my specific career successes, and I worked on the EEOC Select Task Force for the study of workplace harassment, which was um, a group of experts brought in by the EEOC, on the 30th anniversary of the Supreme Court case that first recognized harassment as a form of discrimination, where we had to be brought together because for 30 years of legal protections, it hadn't stopped anything. The numbers are just as bad, the activities are just maybe a little more covert, a little less out in the open. But other courts have also made it impossible for plaintiffs to have the type of protection that the Supreme Court envisioned now 35 years ago. So I mean, there are those proud moments, but I think the moments that stick out to me aren't really so much about proud moments as I would say happy moments. And the happy moments, like even during COVID, I've had some of those times when to be able to see that I helped a teacher to get an accommodation, or to get leave even that they were denied. Those are the moments that keep me going. So those have to be those proudest or happiest moments. And as an educator, you have those as well. It's when the light bulb clicks for a student and they go, wow, I didn't know what you're talking about for 3 weeks, but now I understand all of it. And I'm looking back on the semester and it's like, this all makes sense to me now. And sometimes it means they're changing their whole direction. It may be in life or their career or whatever. So those moments too. But I would say it's really, not so much about the proudest moments as the happiest moments, and seeing how I can help people to make a difference in their own lives, or give them the tools to make those differences. And right now it's sometimes easy things that it shouldn't take my involvement at all. And it is like things like helping them to get accommodations or helping them to get leave so they can feel safe and not have this stress that we're all going through right now. So
I love that. The happiest moments. The happiest moments are often the proudest moments. And we know for students, for human beings, when you're happy, you're motivated,
yeah.
right? When it's relevant, you enjoy it. The kids that like the particular subject, like you might say to his child, what's your favorite subject? Well, that's the subject they're doing the best in.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your least favorite? That's the one they're struggling in,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So the happiest moments and the proudest moments, I can see how those go hand to hand.
And, one thing that we're very passionate about is like words matter,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I have such positive regard for you is, you're very humble, but you as I'm getting to know you more and more, like, you are doing, incredible, deeply important work. And to say, well, I'm happy that it happened. Um, to allow yourself permission to say, and I had something to do with that, because that's life-giving. It's purposeful, to show that what you're doing is making a difference. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to honor your great work and your humility as well.
Well, well, thanks. That means a lot. So I really appreciate that.
So the next question is a little playful. Um, Imagine that you're on an elevator,
Yeah.
and you're hopefully it's a pretty long ride, up to the top. You've got but you only have a couple minutes realistically,
Okay.
right? And the door opens up, and there's someone, and you're like, oh, I get to have a couple minutes with them.
Yeah.
Who do you wish most would ride that elevator with you? And if you were to, like, blow their mind, or say something to them, what would you say?
Yeah. So, um, so I watched a couple of your YouTube videos. So, so I've been thinking about this one a little bit, to be honest. And if you could just let me cheat a little bit, because I want to answer this twice in a way. Okay. And the first one is really about what's going on right now. And if I could have anybody in an elevator for a couple of minutes, honestly, it would be Randy Weingarten, or I believe the name is Becky Pringle, the new president of the NEA. And really, what I would like to say to them, and it's something that I say to union leaders all the time, is that take care of your people, and your people will take care of the rest, right? So your job is to look out for the teachers, and the teachers will take care of the profession. Stop putting your judgment into the profession. That's what they're there for. You're there to protect them. So protect them, because right now they need it more than ever, right? Right now during COVID, they need that. And going forward, they need it too. They need to be treated as professionals. So I'd love to be able to have that conversation directly with them, because I think they know it, but I think by the time they get to where they are, and sometimes when they're at that position for a long time, they lose sight of it. And so they start thinking that they have to be the ones protecting the profession, and they lose sight of the importance of protecting the teachers. The other side of that is honestly, and it goes back to some of those happy moments, and this one's just like so simple, and it's sort of ridiculous, but I'd like to be able to talk to, again, and I don't, I'm not saying this to be this, I'm not, this is heartfelt and honest, and I hope it comes across that way, but to teachers, because to tell them, how much they're doing. And I bring that up because it's been probably about 2 years ago. I did that with the teachers for my kids, and their reaction was like, "Wow, we never hear that, and thank you so much." And I thought, well, how can you never hear that? And then before COVID, I sort of got in the practice of every few weeks posting that on some teachers' sites, just to say, hey, just honestly want to thank you for what you've done for the past, 2 or 3 weeks, in case you haven't heard that from anybody else. And too many of them never hear it from anybody else. And they're there for everybody. Again, to go back to that, they're there for everybody. Every community member benefits from teachers helping our kids to develop in so many ways. So, the first conversation would be hard and needed, and the second conversation would be one that I would just, like to have, and we all should have more often. So, and I know that both of you are teachers, so you may not be able to say this because, it's sort of, you might view it as self-serving, but for everybody else out there, you really need to have that conversation with teachers and just tell them how much they're doing for all of us. And because they should hear that.
We're also both parents. So, to remember to go out and thank our teachers. And, when I was a fitness instructor, I always said around the holiday time, if you're looking to give someone a gift, go thank their manager, go tell their, give their manager, you know, a compliment about whatever work they're doing. And I always said, it's not for me. You don't have to go to my manager, but if you're at the grocery store, go find the grocery store manager and tell them that that clerk always greets you, right?
Yeah.
Or whether
it.
your mail person, like whomever, as many as you can do. It's free, it's easy, it's uplifting, it's a gift. And then I started thinking, why am I just saying this at the holiday time? Why don't I remind people of this, you know, throughout? Because I had captive audience of 30 people in my cycling studio, right? Yep. and they loved it because it made them feel good too. And that's what kept people coming back to my class, because we had this feel of positivity walking into the room.
And those are great groups right now too. I mean, you hit the postal workers. We've lost so many postal workers as a result of COVID. I mean, they have lost their lives, and people have lost sight of that, I think. And so thanking them is so critical, and thanking their managers. And in the frontline workers in grocery stores, so many of them I know are young kids, and they're facing things that they have no idea, and they probably don't even understand. But the majority are not. The majority are people who are putting, you know, bringing home, you know, the food for their families, and paying their families' medical bills. And so reaching out to them is critical. And I would add Amazon workers to that too. And, you know, because I don't think any of us, even if we try to, you know, stay away from Amazon, it's pretty impossible. And those workers are there every day, and working under incredibly stressful conditions. And, you know, sending a thank you out to them too would be incredible. And letting their managers know too, because, you know, and letting their managers know that we don't expect them to be superhumans. I mean, because all of those teachers, grocery store workers, Amazon workers, postal workers, too oftentimes it seems that we expect them to be superhumans, and that's just not fair. So
yeah, and I always thank the person who's cleaning the grocery cart, right?
Yeah.
Every time I walk in the door, thank you for helping keeping us safe every time.
Yes.
But I like the idea of thanking that person directly so that they get the impact. But when we thank the manager, that trickles into the culture of the system. It helps that particular employee get on a better foot with their manager, because the managers only hear complaints, right?
Yes.
Just like teachers, that's all we ever hear is the complaints. We rarely, except for on Teacher Appreciation Week.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what, you know, we're always looking for a couple of buzzworthy hashtags, right, Jerry? You know, and the positive comments are definitely needed at this time. And, you know, we're fortunate where we are reminded, thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you do. But there's that one, it just takes that one CC on a frustrated email, and it can just, you crumble. And so my thing is, like, how might we get the word out? Like, the CC should be a positive CC campaign, right? It's like, just CC the principal saying, like, look at how flexible and accommodating that teacher was. And, you know, just to flip the script on a CC, and it's just, you know, spreading the love, like CC love, I don't know. But, you know, how validating would that be? Is you're coming in the inbox and you see a CC and you're just like, yes. Like, they get, you know, like Sally Field, you know, they really, really like me. Right. So, or, you know, Sally Field CC, but,
yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Also, when she was accepting an award from one of the best movies ever, right? Norma Ray, and, you know, one of the few positive union movies out there. So.
Yes.
And I want to say, for all the teachers that are watching this, I read in a book, and I wish I remember the name of the author right now. Sorry, I'm forgetting. But it was more like a book about how to be passionate about teaching again, like when you've lost it. And one of the things he mentioned was, take all the positive comments you've ever received from parents or students and compile them into a binder. And when you're feeling down, go through and read them. And I haven't been so good at that, but I do have a handful. And when I've looked at them, it really does lift me up. So yeah, the power of positive words is pretty incredible. And so that makes me wonder, Jerry, how do we bring this conversation into the schools, into the school system, so that you know, you get your ideal outcome? And what would that outcome be?
Well, I think again, the ideal outcome is to have, you know, my ideal really for schools is to have educator self-directed enterprises. I think we need to get back to that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're eliminating all of administration. It just means that you're running it differently. It means re-professionalizing teachers, right? Bringing that back to them. It means recognizing the professionalization or the professional backgrounds that they have. You know, K-12 was new to me 4 years ago, sort of getting into that area, and so I still learn things all the time about it. And like the fact that principal came from the principal teacher was a completely new concept to me a couple months ago. Something that I learned. Getting back to that, right? So that the idea is that teachers who are able to help teachers become the leaders in their organizations, and that may sound a bit foreign, but well, it's sort of, I'm not sure why I chose that term, but because the next thing I was going to say, but when we look internationally, it's actually pretty normal, right? And it's very normal at the universities to have that sort of system where it's faculty members who work as administrators and then come back to being faculty to sort of know that they're going to have to work in the beds that they've made, sort of say. And to see the same things with teachers. And how do we get there? I think, from my perspective, and maybe this is my academic perspective, I think part of it is getting people to understand that reality that worker self-directed enterprises work, they work better. Allowing the people at the bottom to have more say benefits the organization as a whole, and showing them that this is not some abnormality. It's actually more of a norm than having this system where we create layer after layer after layer of individuals that get further and further away from what's really going on and what makes the organization work. So, I think at least part of the onus falls on researchers to bring that research back to the people who can have an impact: legislators, policymakers, administrators, teachers unions, to say these types of things can work and actually do work in other places.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about what you said in regards to like our very first president, George Washington did not want to be president. He just wanted to work on his land, work the farm, but they needed a servant. And he was a person who had the capabilities of doing that. And he was very humble, and he had the awareness of what the people need because he was one of the people. Right? Yeah. It wasn't this like high up hierarchy type of thing. And, the school system that I was in, where I was not treated so well, that principal superintendent had never been a teacher. And I was shocked that person even got to the level that they were at. I didn't know that could happen. Right. And as a young teacher myself, I was wanting to, within the first 3 years, I was feeling burnt out already. And I was wanting to leave the classroom and become like, I did a lot of master teaching for student teachers. I had like a student teacher every semester because I knew this woman at the local university who liked the style that I had. And so she put her student teachers into my room. And so I got to really enjoying that aspect of it too. And I thought, well, what if I step out and I be like, a teacher coach, a teacher on special assignment, where I coach new teachers, but I have a partner. So every 2 years, I'm coaching the new teachers and my partner's teaching the classroom. Yeah. And then we flip and my partner becomes the coach and I go back to the classroom, so I don't lose sight of what it's like to be in there, because I noticed right away that anybody who stepped out of the classroom, even if it wasn't an administrative level, but it was just like, some kind of support level, they still lost sight of what's happening to run a class. And so that was my vision, is having this kind of rotating. And I've heard of principals who go in and like, okay, I'm going to teach for 3 weeks in this class, and then they rotate through different classes. And I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, and it does work, and it's applied in a lot of places, and and even limiting that time, like a lot of schools in Europe, it is, universities, it's 3 years. You go and you'll work as an administrator at most for 3 years, and then you'll go back. And oftentimes, to your point, Heidi, the best people for those positions are the ones who don't want them, right? Sort of the George Washington, right? Well, we're specifically selecting you to be the first president because you don't want it. Somebody who wants that power might be the one who's going to abuse it. So.
Right.
Wow, I love what you're all saying. And to that end, at the Kids First conference that we just did, there was a design session at the end, reflecting and connecting to the content, doing some SMART goals and a strength-based analysis instead of a SWOT. It's called a SOAR, because you don't want to look at your threats, right? You want to look at your opportunities. So, and your aspirations. But when at the end we had some demographic data, how do you identify racially, all of these things, it was, do you self-identify as a leader?
Mm,
And by and large, most of the people who attended were social workers and teachers and educators, and it was 72% said, yes, I'm a leader.
wow.
And I
Wow.
thought that was extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I've been advocating, with our client for a long time to say, anybody can show up as a leader. And
Yeah.
what might that look like? And how might an administrator empower that leadership
Yeah.
in the classroom? So I thought
Yeah.
that was really, talk about opportunities, right there, opportunities and aspirations of how might we all be able to lead.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. Just needs that empowerment step, as you said. Wow. Outstanding.
And I know we're getting close to wrapping it up, but I was reminded of this one more thing that I wanted to mention about the leaders doing the role of the workers, right? And there's a whole TV series around it, Undercover Boss. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever watched that show, but I've actually enjoyed seeing the boss in there and being like, wow, this is a mess,
Yeah.
and conditions are not good. Or even like when they find employees that are all, snarky and whatever, and you think, oh my God, they're going to lose their job. They end up finding compassion for that
Yeah.
person and saying, how can I support you so that you're not so negative, so that you're
Yeah.
not so miserable in your job? You know what I mean? Like something else is going on. And that show always makes me cry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It really can be. And I have some different views on that show in the sort of the theory of the show and the practice of it. But you're right. When you watch it, it does, and it impacts you. And one of the people I didn't mention today was a plant manager I worked for, Mike Stegall, who did very much that, and much like Undercover Boss, but without the need of the TV show behind him. But when we had a big plant transformation, and he put his coveralls on and got down into the manual labor work. And when he was assigned a team, and he was assigned a team the way everybody else was assigned the team in the whole plant, he was not the leader of the team. And he went in there and that said that specifically. He said, look, I work over there usually in the office. I hope I know what's going on out here, but I don't know it the way you do. You guys are going to lead me. You tell me what I need to do. You order me around today. You tell me whatever it is. And it's several weeks of work, but, and it was really important to the environment of that facility that he did that, because he could have done it much differently. And unfortunately, many bosses do it much differently.
Well, and it takes a really psychologically safe environment for the employees to be able to tell him what to do.
Yeah.
Because I know, in some of those work environments that I've been in, I'd be afraid to lose my job
Yeah.
if I told my boss what to do,
Yeah.
So that's just a wonderful, wonderful description of what, an organization can look like. And I hope that we can see more of that in schools. So
Yes.
as we're wrapping it up, I think Jen might have a few more questions for you.
Well, it's just a question about a question. So it's
Yeah.
very meta. We've been asking you all these questions, and we would like to give you an opportunity, knowing that the roles that we play, and now that you're getting to know a little bit about our passions as well and how they resonate and align. Do you have a question that you would like to ask us?
Yeah, I do, and it's sort of it's a big question. It's a broad question, and I don't mean to put it that way to put you on the spot or anything, but it's something that is just so important right now with the crisis, but also so important sort of in the longer term crisis that we see. And that is that, and you are aware of this and you've mentioned it so many times and you've experienced it, but teachers are so stressed out right now. Every survey that we do shows the level of stress, and COVID's made it so much worse, no matter what condition that they're teaching under. Being forced to face and the health stress added to that, the hybrid and the trying to be in two places at once, which you just physically can't be, and the stress of that, or as I've mentioned, virtual and just the big changes to that. So, I mean, I guess my question for you is if you could give like one piece of advice that might just help teachers get through the next couple of weeks or the next day or whatever it might be, what would that be right now? Because they do need to hear that. And honestly, faculty need to hear that too. So I would love to hear, maybe that just that sort of snippet that you could give to say, you know, do this or look at things this way or whatever that might be.
Do you mind if I go? Because I have something that popped in my head. So I think to document your joy, and to create moments of joy. Um, to just keep that happy list for yourself. And then the more you document it, the more you might get more ideas. And so how can you create a positive spiral as opposed to a negative spiral? Because if you start looking for the negatives, you're definitely going to find it, and then you're going to get really good at seeing that. But those little crumbs of validation, um, if you keep on looking for those, I think you'll see that might sustain you more than you think. And to do those, positive self-reflections, I think that's what's coming to mind right now. And I'm interested to know, Heidi, what you're thinking. And I might have something more profound than that, but after I hear Heidi's.
That was the first thing that came to my mind, actually, Jen, was paying attention to the moments of joy. But then I had a bigger picture of self-care. And I want to talk about those moments of joy a little bit, because from a neuroscience perspective, happiness, joy, whatever you want to call it, it's not a big thing. It's moment by moment by moment. And if you spend the time in a mindful type of way of really being in that moment when it happens and recognizing, oh my gosh, look how that feels right now. Like when I see a hummingbird, I feel so much joy just for seeing this thing flutter by and not be distracted by my phone or by anything, and just really like remember what that feels like, not just what I'm seeing, not in a head kind of a way, but really an embodied kind of a way. What do I feel right now? And then at the end of the day, when you can string all those moments together, because you may have had a shit show in between, but if you can string those moments of joy together, you end up with a really positive day. And if you can reflect on that at the end of the day, no matter how much of a shit show the rest of it was, it's going to elevate you. And that's been proven. I mean, they've done studies around that. And I'm not this like hippy dippy kind of person. I don't believe in it until I see the frickin' study, or I try it myself and I'm like, oh yeah, that did work. And I was in a school for a while where I was not happy, and it was, it was right around election time when things were getting really, can you imagine what that would be like? And I started noticing in the staff room, people were like unfriending their 20-year friend on Facebook because they had a different belief system politically than them, or they were angry with their family. And I was like, oh my God, this is getting toxic in here. And so I started a gratitude list in the staff room. So every morning it said, I am grateful for, and it had today's date, and I left a bunch of markers out, and I would write 2 things on there, and then it would inspire other people to write things. So like you said, we get inspired by each other, Jen. And by the end of the day, there'd be a list of 20 things on there, and I'd post it on the wall. The next morning, I'd do the same thing in a different color. And then I had every other was a different color, like, 2 colors. And by the end of the month, the whole faculty room was covered in these positive statements. And it inspired and uplifted every single person that walked into that room. And some wrote on there and some did not. But I had a lot of people say, I never felt like I should write anything, but I was uplifted just by reading what was up there. And then the principal, I mean, I just did this on my own. I didn't have permission to do it or anything. I just, felt like we needed it. And then the principal started bringing like PTA in to see what an amazing school we are. You know what I mean? Like, because it really brought this feel. So for teachers here in isolation, I mean, I'm not a kind of teacher that likes to teach behind the closed door, and I'm sure most teachers aren't. And being distance learning, you're isolated right now, extremely isolated. So I say, get together as a staff and have some kind of, or just a couple of teachers, your best buds that are your people, and have a joint gratitude list going so that you can inspire each other and stay connected and all of that. So not only noticing the joys of your day, but then being filled by hearing other people's joys. And then overall self-care. And self-care is not painting your nails or getting a facial or massage. I mean, it can be those things, but that's not all it is. Self-care is making sure that your mental health and well-being are taken care of first. Be selfish, teachers. Be selfish, servant workers. Because if you're not, you have nothing left to give.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you. And in hearing that, I've always said that, if you have simple pleasures, then you'll always, be able to, that low maintenance, simple pleasure, then you can find that joy. So, it could be that favorite flavor, I love lemon lavender celestial seasonings tea, and to make sure that I have it and I can just breathe it, and that mug, my little, Fox mug. But if you just take that moment and, the smell of burning leaves, and to just like stand there and breathe it in, and like, I have my 6 senses. Look at the soft blanket, right? And to just, and to keep the wonder, the feeling of wonder and awe is like neuroscientifically proven to make us happy. Wonder and awe, and the beauty of a leaf, the miracle of what a leaf can do, and how a tree has the same structure as our lungs. I'm going into all my, Heidi, where I'm going with all this, but just, and this, there you go. Like, this is a tree, but it also looks like the neurons, like in an MRI, right? Because we have that power within us, right? So just all of that, and reflecting that to the kids, and geeking out on something. If you are passionate about something and they see you come alive about it, if it's for a couple of minutes, oh my gosh, did you see that Netflix? Whoa. And you just start talking about it and connecting with the kids, and realizing that there are remediation programs proven to close the learning gap. So if what we need right now is just time to feel happy, when some of these challenges are removed, we'll actually rebound quicker. That resilience, right? And resilience is strong relationships, trusting relationships, and this is proven. Trusting relationships, the ability to contribute meaningfully, and high expectations. Right. So to think about, like, what are my high expectations for my students right now? And it might not be getting that highest test score, but if you can be that relationship, and you can have a high expectation and let them contribute in a meaningful way, they will become resilient.
And we are resilient. I mean, Jen, you and I have both been one of those teachers that experienced those hardships, and we made it through using these techniques, using mindfulness practices and staying positive. I mean, I would go to every staff meeting with a fuzzy blanket and a warm mug because that makes me feel good. And I can get through COVID because, I mean, I just moved. You know, I quit my job, I moved, and COVID's happening.
And you formed a business. You formed a business.
And I formed two businesses,
thing.
actually. and Jerry, you were talking about, you know, the trickle effect of COVID and how it affects so many different people. Well, moving, I mean, buying a couch, my fridge died, I had to buy a new one. I needed a new car because I sold my car. I mean, it was like, holy cow, it was so hard to do this move, not only to stay physically safe, but to even get everything lined up that I needed to get lined up. And we moved in May. You know, we sold the house in March when the schools shut down, and we moved in May. So,
and the wildfires, remember that?
And the fires, my parents were evacuated.
It just never ended for you.
But I'm okay. And I'm not just saying that like, I'm fine. No, I'm happy. I'm happy. I also recognize my sadness. I miss my neighbors. I miss my old neighbors. You know, I miss teaching classes. I miss teaching the fitness classes and having that energy in the room. And at the same time, I'm happy where I am. So I can be both. And I don't let the sadness and all the things I've lost overwhelm me, because I have those self-care practices that we've been talking about. So we are resilient. Human beings are resilient. We have the ability to do so. We also have the ability to drive ourselves into the ground. So it's a choice. We have a choice. Yeah. And we have to know the skills on how to use the positive to get to the positive.
The other thing I just kind of wanted to say, and we're like going so over time and everything, but in looking at the three of us on this screen, I also do want to recognize that we three also have incredible privilege.
Yeah.
And so the ability to drop and be still and reflect on all the great things, like we're privileged to do that. And how might we use our privilege to make that easier for others?
Yes. That's great. Yes.
Thank you.
That's so critical.
Absolutely. On that note, we'll close this session of Mugs and Hugs. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us today and bringing this really rich conversation. I know so many teachers that I'm going to reach out to and be like, hey, you got to hear this one. So
thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. So.
And can you hold up the mug? I haven't done anything with these pictures yet, but I'm going to put some collage. Heidi, you probably have a better idea, but I can't hold mine up because I'm doing the print screen. But 3, 2, 1. All right, we got it.
Excellent.